We're going to go through chapter 9, which is pay for performance. And I will say on some of the slides, pay for performance is going to be a capital P, a little f, and a capital P, because that's often how it's written in HR when you're quickly talking about pay for performance. So we went through chapter 11 last week where we learned about how to do performance evaluations to evaluate people's performance in the workplace. So now we're going to go back to chapter 9 and figure out how do we use that performance evaluation information to determine pay for employees, especially to differentiate, employee behavior or employee performance that's really good versus poor or needs improvement. So remember from way back in exam 1, we learned that whether people do something or behave a certain way at work is actually a function of three things. It's their ability to actually do that behavior, their motivation to do it at the workplace, and then the opportunity for them to actually perform that behavior. What I like about this particular graphic from the textbook is that that's actually our HR processes support employees performing certain behaviors in the workplace. So with ability, what we can do is recruit and select employees who already have the ability to perform certain behaviors that we want them to do at work. But if they don't have that ability, or if our requirements change, we can do training and development with those employees to help them learn how to do the behaviors that we want them to do at work. In terms of motivation, we can use compensation to motivate employees, which is kind of what our class is about, and especially what the next few chapters will be about. We can use performance management then to direct employees' behavior and then reward it when we see the behavior we want. And then we can also develop an organizational culture that supports certain kinds of behaviors, like acting ethical or working in teams and that sort of thing. Finally, we have the opportunity triangle where we can provide opportunities for employees to perform these behaviors. One of those is an organizational development. So how do we actually develop our organization? How do we structure it as we're developing it? And then how do we change it over time? So this is where sometimes that new training and development or new knowledge that employees have can actually innovate processes, but also products and services within the organization. We can also have organizational design. So this is like your structure or your hierarchy within the organization. So do you have a flat hierarchy where people have a lot of decision power, or are you very hierarchical and maybe have centralized power? Those kinds of different aspects of the organization. And then HR planning is a really key part of this because not only do you have to create these processes, but HR works with managers to implement those processes in whatever kind of organization you work in. And then on the very bottom of this graphic, we have these contextual forces. These are forces that still affect what's going on within our organization. They can also affect employee behavior, but they may be things that are outside of our control. So things like working with unions, economic conditions like a recession, or right now where some organizations still can't find the employees they need because the employment rate is so low, or public policy and legislation that changes the requirements of how we operate our businesses. Another really great exhibit in this chapter, and I will say this chapter, the writing itself is fluff. There's a lot of jokes. I don't know, this seems like a very different chapter from the other chapters, but the key kind of in this chapter is a lot of the exhibits. They provide a lot of really useful information. So in Exhibit 9.3, we look at the relationship between how we can measure individual behavior versus corporate performance, because these both affect what kind of compensation system we should develop. So let's go through these situations A, B, C, and D. In situation A, you have low variability in corporate performance, which means from year to year, the corporate performance doesn't change much. Revenue is about the same, or it's slowly increasing or decreasing, but it's not drastically different. But you also have individual performance that's either unstable or it's unclear how to measure it. Unstable would be individual performance where it may be difficult to maintain the performance because you have to do lots of different things. Or, if you're working with clients, for example, their expectations are changing and different across different clients. You could also have unclear performance measures. Lots of knowledge workers work in this kind of arena where it's not clear what they're doing until they've produced a report or worked with someone like in a team, but even then, sometimes the work they're doing is not a tangible product that you can count. In that case, when you have low corporate performance variability but unclear performance measures, you want to provide a wide variety of awards beyond just money because you may not be able to measure individual performance very well. But you do want to include a significant incentive component because you do want employees to continue to contribute to that stable corporate performance that you have. In situation B, you have unstable or high variability in corporate performance, so it changes from year to year. In that case, when you have unclear performance measures, you're still going to provide a wide variety of awards beyond just money because you can't completely determine individual performance or at least measure it very well. But you want to emphasize base pay with low incentives because that variability is often outside of employees' control. The high variability could be partially the way that your employees are performing, but it's often due to factors outside of the organization, such as economic factors. In situation C, we have a stable corporate performance, but we also have stable and clear performance measures, which means individual performance is really easy to measure. This could be something like in the book, we have some factories that they talk about where the performance is pretty stable year after year because a lot of the technology drives how quickly they can make the product that they're making in their factory. And you can measure for individuals and even teams how quickly they're making these products, how good of quality they're making in those products in terms of quality control, how many times they have to stop the machines, that sort of thing. In this case, you can emphasize monetary rewards because you want to continue kind of that performance to create that stability within the organization. But you can have a large incentive component too because you actually can measure individual performance. And then finally, in situation D, you have a lot of instability in terms of corporate performance. Again, the instability is often outside of the organization. It's not within employees' control completely, but you actually can measure individual performance really well. In this case, you can emphasize monetary rewards because that link between individual performance and the behaviors you want employees to perform in the workplace is very clear. So you could, but because of that variability within corporate performances outside of employee control, you want to have large base pay with low incentives. So situation D is probably quite common in like accounting, for example, where you might be able to measure, how many clients someone helped, but whether clients are going to come for that help, some of it will be required because they have to have auditors, but some during a recession, for example, are not going to pay for a lot of extra services. So what behaviors do employers care about? Remember that everything in this class links back to our organizational strategy. So essentially, we want employees who are performing behaviors that help our organizational strategy. And so for HR, we can think about this in 4 ways. First, how do we attract good employment prospects to join our company? So this is recruitment and selection. Then how do we retain those good employees once they join? So that's a little bit about the kind of rewards that we give those employees. How do we get employees to develop skills for current and future jobs? So that's a lot of training and development. And then how do we get employees to perform well while they are here? So that's performance management. So we're really trying to get good people into our organizations, and then how do we keep them there when they're doing a good job? So we have to think then about what motivates employees to answer those questions. Motivation involves figuring out what's important to a person, and this is different from individual employee to individual employee. I would like you to think back, for example, maybe the first or second week of class where you did that activity, kind of comparing the compensation strategy of an organization to what you really value in that organization. And I think a lot of you had some discrepancies. So you can see that a lot of organizations have values and the way they reward their employees isn't exactly the way you would want to be rewarded. And that's something to keep in mind when you're looking for a job because you're going to want to find fit there in order to stay motivated to keep that job into the future. Once you figure out what's important, you want an organization that offers that in exchange for some desired behavior, and hopefully that desired behavior is clear for their employees. So what a lot of organizations do is they provide flexible compensation. And this allows individual employees to create a package of rewards that best suits their personal needs, with the idea that if employees have this ability to create their own package, then organizations don't have to figure out what every single employee wants and kind of morph themselves into that or provide all of those rewards. They can allow employees to decide what rewards they want. The key, though, for HR and for managers who are implementing this system is cost analysis, making sure that your employees don't go over some price point in terms of creating their reward package so that you can make this sustainable, but also so it's not hurting your budget more than if you just had the same rewards for all employees. And the idea is that if you have flexible compensation, you'll get more out of your employees of the kinds of behaviors they want than if you force them into a system with rewards that they may not value.